They actually gave me 45 minutes. I don't want to talk for 45 minutes. I'm going to make it in half an hour. And then for the last 15 minutes, if you guys have any questions, you can just ask me. Shoot me any questions, and I'll just answer right away. Okay, so today I want to talk about how to draw attention to your games, whether you're working in casual games, hyper casual, Web3, any sort of game that you're working on. You guys need creatives, right? Any sort of marketing material, promotional videos. So don't think of it as like a marketing framework for hyper casual only. I want you guys to apply this to any of your games, regardless of the genre. So when it comes to marketability, it means like basically how marketable is your game, right? It comes to, when we talk about marketability, it's all about creatives, like advertisements, videos that you put up on these networks. There are, of course, other things when it comes to creatives, like theme and execution. Like what is your theme in the video and how well your art and mechanic have been executed within the video. So we'll talk about all these points one by one in our next slides. And I'm not gonna go into, idea validation. Let's just assume that any videos, any examples that we're seeing today, those ideas have been already validated. So when you make your advertisement, the one thing you want to absolutely make sure is whether it's clear, like whether the mechanic is clearly depicted in your video. And also, users want to know why they should play this game. Like, does it look fun enough? Like, interesting enough? So let's make sure that it looks super interesting in the first 3 seconds. When you think about all these different networks, I mean, your ads are up on the Facebook network, AppLovin network, any sort of social media network. Sometimes they pop up within the game as like an interstitial RV. Almost every time, most of times you only have 3 seconds to catch their attention, users' attention, right? I'm just scrolling through my Instagram, Facebook. I'm not gonna just stop just because I'm seeing your ad, right? It has to be really clever, uniquely made in order for me to stop and watch your ads. So that's where this within 3 seconds comes in. I'll show you some examples of bad creatives. Let's review it together. There is actually a sound. I don't know whether you guys can hear it, but I'm just gonna turn it up all the way. What did you guys think? I mean, for me, it was just so boring. Very, very boring. I don't even know why the name of the game is Clams Casino when all I see is, I'm just gonna mute this one. All I see is just a gas station. Like there's nothing to do with casino. I have no idea what I'm supposed to do. Like, am I supposed to click any icons? Like, what is my goal? Is my goal to collect 25K? Or is it to get more customers? I have no idea what's going on. And as a result, you can see that the CPI is over $1, close to $2. If you're familiar with the industry, that's like a pretty bad CPI, right? If you get your initial CPI of $2, no publisher is gonna take you seriously. We can talk about IPM a little bit more. So this is something that I learned at Lion Studios as well. We did not have this IPM metric last year. This is something that we started looking at starting from early this year. So CPI is, I mean, pretty straightforward, right? Cost per install, like how expensive each user cost to download your game. IPM, like literally, it means impression per million. So basically, it gives you like an indication of your game scalability. That means within like when you have like a certain budget, like how many users or how broad user base can your game reach? So it means if you have high IPM, let's say 70, 80, over 100, that means your game is marketable across all gender, all age groups, any gamers. Whereas this game has pretty low IPM of 18.14. That means maybe it's like pretty niche. Like maybe only a few people are interested in this theme of the game. We'll talk more about the IPM in later slides. I want to give you guys a bit of background about this game. Gladiators in Position. Lion was testing this game, I remember very well, because they were testing it for months, which is pretty rare in hyper-casual when trends change every month. If I remember correctly, they started testing this game last year, October, November. And we killed this game early this year in May or April. So they were working on this game for at least 4 or 5 months, and then we killed it. This is one of the first creatives that they tested. Let's have a look together. Just gonna... I don't know whether you guys have noticed. That was your first 3 seconds. And then I'm just gonna, I'm not even gonna watch it. I'm just gonna scroll down to the next ad. Because what I see is I don't know what's going on here. I mean, what's the gameplay? I'm just upgrading like my power-ups. I don't even know what kind of power-ups these are. Like, what does ATK mean? What does tech mean? I have no idea. I'm just upgrading my power, and that's it. This part looks a lot more interesting, right? Camera zooming in, zooming out, killing people. So yeah, CPI was pretty high, over $1, and IPM pretty low. Again, we can talk a little bit more about IPM here. Gladiator, just the theme itself, is not very marketable in general. Do you think anyone like from age 13 to 17 would be interested in this gladiator theme? Like, do you think, I'm not sexist, but do you think any women would be interested in downloading this game just from watching this video for 3 seconds? So this is targeting specifically for male users in their 20s to 40s. So this is the theme that you want to avoid if you want your games to have like a better scalability throughout, like across different user groups. Now, this is another creative that we tested for the same game. You can see that the CPI, we cut it down to half, 63 cents from $1.26. We can watch the video first. So basically, it's the same creative, but we just cut out the first, that weird UI upgrading part, and we just straight went into the gameplay. So if you guys look, sorry. 1, 2, 3, camera zooming in, 1 shot, 1 kill, pretty satisfying. Exactly the same video. We had our ad team worked on some sound effect, we put some emoji, we put some captions, but developer didn't do anything else. And then the CPI was 63 cents. What's interesting here is the IPM is still pretty low, right? Because the theme is still the same, right? It's still the gladiator theme. They didn't change anything about the theme. So we just executed the mechanic better, right? We just show them the actual gameplay in the first 3 seconds. So CPI got lower, but IPM, the theme is still the gladiator theme, appealing to only specific user groups. So it's still very low. So I've been talking a lot about the theme, so let's just dive deep into this. Usually, when you pitch your ideas to publishers or users, you want to make sure that you can describe your game in one sentence, whatever it is, right? You want your games to be intuitively understood either by video or either by one sentence. So you can say, oh, my game is ASMR. ASMR what? ASMR sorting game, coloring game. My game is runner, playing against other players, running up towards the goal. So make sure that when you pitch your ideas to publishers, users, whoever your audience might be, make sure that there's one sentence of what the game is about. I don't want to read, I don't want to read like a big paragraph about what the game is about. Just give me one sentence so I can move on to what's important. And obviously, theme is user's first impression is determined by the theme, like we saw in the Gladiator. Gladiator theme, I'm not interested. I'm just gonna move on, right? But let's say we're talking about coloring games, drawing games, something like visually pretty or beautiful. Then obviously, people in their 13 to 17 group, like age group, or women, female, they will be more interested and they will just get hooked within the 3 seconds. So that's how you want to decide on your theme, right? Or do you want to target male audience or female audience? Do you want to target young users or older users? Publishers' perspective, our perspective is games scale a lot better when you target young female audience. When we scale our game in different networks, AppLovin, Unity, AdMob, Mintegral, whatever, all these coloring games, decorating games, or ASMR games targeting female audience, they have a lot better scalability than arcade battle, like male-centric games. I'm not saying that male-centric games are not publishable. It is publishable, but you will have to work a lot more in order to get great retention, to have higher LTV. So that's another talk, but we'll just focus on this. And it impacts the breadth of appeal. So there's actually a graph that I want to talk about. So when it comes to theme, there are two factors that you want to consider. The first one is the breadth of appeal. So that means your user base, how broad your users are gonna be, right? And the depth determines the CPI of your game, breadth determines the IPM of your game. So if your mechanic is clear, if your art has been executed in an excellent way, you're gonna get low CPI. But does it automatically give you low IPM? No. That's where the breadth of appeal comes in, and that's what you want to consider next time you talk about, like you want to talk about any ideas with publishers or any of your audience. Now, moving on to the execution part. So we just talked about theme, the overall creatives. And now I want to talk about art and mechanic that go into creatives. So there are a lot of things affecting your creatives, right? Let's talk about art first. So there's camera, lighting, character models, assets, environment, animations, particle effect, color, backgrounds. These are the things that you can experiment when you test multiple creatives. I want to focus on the camera and lighting. So low effort on the developer side, and then high impact. So basically, early on, when you're testing multiple creatives, just base stage, like you're not scaling your game, you're not interested in monetization, you just want to overcome the first hurdle with publishers, right? The KPI, hitting the KPI. What we want you to work on and experiment are lighting and camera. It's the easiest thing, right? You don't have to do anything. You just try dynamic camera, fixed camera, different camera angle, and see which camera gives you the best CPI. Another thing is lighting. Sometimes I don't see a lot of contrast in lighting. Sometimes character models blend into the background or the environment. I don't really see what's going on very clearly from the far. What you're seeing on your desktop is vastly different from what users are seeing on their phone. Their phone is way smaller. So if you make your lighting not great, they won't be able to distinguish like what from what. Like they won't necessarily know what's going on. So these are the two things that would probably take you, what, 5, 10, 30 minutes. You can change quickly and then can possibly lower your CPI. If these don't work, then we can explore environments, character models. So character models are something a little bit tricky to explain because when it comes to arcade, runner, like battle, action games, sometimes character models don't matter as much. That's why, because when it comes to arcade games, what matters is how it feels on the tip of your finger, right? You want to make sure that it's actually fun to play these games. So that's why you see all these runner games published by us or Voodoo, Supersonic, they all use the same blobby assets, basically assets. No one's doing their own art because it doesn't matter what kind of character they put in their arcade games. It's all about the level design and also how it feels, how smooth it is. So that one's a little bit tricky, so you guys decide if you want to work on it or not. Environment and color, they're kind of on the borderline because sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So for example, if I ask you, hey, let's change some colors, let's give it a bit of like different background. I don't want you to just change the color of the background from white to blue. Come on, guys. Like, it's not gonna change anything. But for example, if it was like a plain background and you wanna give them like a forest background, city background, desert background, then maybe we can lower the CPI. So those are the things that I want to emphasize. And anything below, like close to low impact, I'm not even gonna talk about it. I don't wanna waste anyone's time. You don't have to work on particle effect. Don't even worry about like animations. So I'm just gonna move on. So this is a bad example of bad execution of art. Let's just watch it together. I already lost, I think. I don't know why. I don't know what's going on with these red blocks. The environment is too messy. There's like a lot of things going on here. I don't want to criticize this game a lot, but I mean, it's just bad. I mean, anyone can tell that this ad is pretty bad. I mean, come on, like the texture of the water and the floor, the brown, it's just too noisy. I mean, what's going on with the UI interfering with the entire gameplay? The asset styles are very different across all characters, background, UI, the font. It's just a cluster mess. So this one, obviously, had pretty high CPI, $1.26. Basically, the issues were what I just talked about, the asset quality, color contrast, I don't know what's going on. Pacing is too quick. Within the first 3 seconds, I didn't understand why I lost or whether I was supposed to do anything, like I wasn't sure. So I had hard time understanding what this game or creative was about. Now, this is the same creative different creative for the same game. So basically, we removed all the unnecessary stuff, water, texture, like the floor. We just used the plain blue color. Red and blue are the only colors that you guys see here. I mean, no background, and background is not necessary. We also put the percentage number here so that you can see your progression just intuitively. Everyone can read these numbers, whereas the last one, there was just too much going on. Every number is like different. Every second, it's increasing or decreasing. It was sort of distracting. Whereas this one looks a lot more clean and just pretty to look at. And you guys can see in CPI, we also cut down the CPI to 64 cents from $1.26. And that's like a huge cut when you think about it. It's like half of what was before. By the way, I'm gonna share this deck on LinkedIn after my chat, so you guys don't have to take a screenshot. You guys can just download it directly from LinkedIn. And now moving on from art to mechanic, let's just absolutely make sure that your mechanic is clearly shown in your video, how your game is played, and why should users download your game. Let's look at a bad example first. Okay, question. Who am I here? No idea. Okay, another question. Am I moving or are enemies coming to me? Okay, another question. If I'm moving, how do I move and attack? Is it auto attack? Or do I have to also tap simultaneously the bottom power-ups? No clue. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm just gonna end it here. You guys all agree this is a bad example. Unfortunately, we killed it immediately. I don't have another example of the same game, like a good version, so let's just move on. This one, let's just watch it together. What do you think? I think at some point, all publishers that I know were working on something like this, merge monsters, merge animals, merge whatever you can. And obviously, we killed this game because everyone else was working on it, but that doesn't mean that this was a bad game. CPI was 50 cents, but everyone knows that these days, no one's getting 10 cents CPI. So that was, pretty okay. You can see that it has like a really high IPM, which is interesting. And I think, in my opinion, it's because it has everything. So for female users, young users, just combining all these different dinosaurs to make like one ultimate dinosaur for the battle, that's pretty interesting. I immediately understand what to do. I just drag and drop whatever the dinosaur kind that I want to merge. I just tap, 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 click the power up to attack. Everything's very clear. And this battle part is probably what appealed to male users, hence the high IPM. So yeah, that was a good example of the mechanic side. So obviously, when it comes to execution, you want to consider both art and mechanic. But obviously, depending on what genre of game that you're working on, you can either focus on art more than mechanic or vice versa, right? If you're working on crazy lab kind, simulation, ASMR, art heavy games, then obviously you want to make sure that your art is in like top quality. Whereas if you're working with Voodoo, arcade action games, then you definitely want to make sure that it feels good on your finger, on the screen, not necessarily about like how great your art is. I I mean, I don't know whether you guys saw most recent Voodoo's like puzzle games or some arcade games. Art, I think I can do it as well. But what they're really good at is nailing down the mechanic and understanding what users want and what's fun for users. So whatever your next idea is, I want you guys to decide where you want to focus depending on which genre. So I just talked about the execution of simulation ASMR. So let's look at this video together. It's just great. Amazing art. Yep, nice art. So Silicon Color Match, we published it. I don't know whether I'm supposed to talk about some metrics, but I'm just gonna talk about it. We published it, I think this year. Is it right? This year, yeah. CPI was great. I mean, I don't think anyone could get like lower than 20 cents CPI very easily as in, back in the days. So this was like a huge win for us, just finding this low CPI game. But you can see that IPM is pretty low. I mean, it's not any different from Gladiator, right? But because CPI was so low, we just wanted to give it a try. So we just ignored the IPM, low IPM. We published this game, and this game was not profitable. After 2 months of scaling, I don't even know whether it even scaled. It didn't give us any profit. It didn't give developer any profit. I'm saying this because I will be talking about the hyper-casual trend and where to go next in the afternoon with Ayush from Supersonic. But this is things that I want you guys to consider. There are publishers who focus on CPI, which is great. But it really depends on what you want, right, out of your game. If your goal is to make that one hit game to have in your portfolio, to have that name, to have that publisher's name on your portfolio, then, and you have really great artists, you have really great animator, then go for it. It's not gonna give you long-term profit for 6 to 12 months, but it's gonna give you a quick win that you want. But just remember that any of these games that you see in the top chart, they usually spend more money putting that game in the top chart than earning money for you. And some publishers focus more on top charting games, and they have a reason that's a good reason to get more traction from users. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you're getting millions in profit. So if you are just entering this hyper-casual industry, aiming to make like thousands, like tons of money in your first release, I just want you to know that that's usually not the case. So depends on what you want. Like if you want longer term success, then you want to focus more on the engagement side, like a higher LTV, higher retention. Even if the CPI is over $1, if you have a D1 of 50%, D7 of 20%, your game will be profitable over time for 12 months period. Whereas we published this game, I actually do not understand why we published it. 17 cents CPI, I just checked the retention data before this session. I think the D1 was like 28%. D3 was not even 10%, I think it was 9%, 10%. And D7 was barely 3-4%. So I have no idea why we published this game. But we published it, we failed it, and now we're moving away from games like this. So I just wanted to give you guys a bit of like an internal insight. I really like this game. We didn't publish it at the end. It had a bit of issue with level design, hence retention, hence LTV. But I think this was really cleverly executed, at least for creatives. Let's watch it together. So it's arcade game, kind of action. So like I said, art is just art. There's nothing too crazy going on, everything simple, because what you want to focus on is the actual gameplay, not the art. The mechanic here is drawing, right? Usually when it comes to arcade or action, it's like a joystick, tap and release, hold and release, tap, swipe. But because they put drawing mechanic and actually showing the drawing part in the first 3 seconds, we could get pretty low CPI and pretty high IPM. This is also kind of themeless. This is not appealing to any specific users, right? Like this is not about cars, racing. This is not about gladiator. Anyone could see this and find it interesting because the mechanic is drawing. And that's what they really made sure that people see in the first 3 seconds. So that was like a good example. So, it's been 32 minutes. I really want to wrap it up so that I can get some questions from you guys. When you guys decide your next idea, let's think about both breadth and depth of appeal. Again, breadth is the wide range of users that you want to target. And then the depth is the art and execution. So let's consider both, not just one or the other. And what's the second one? Don't make or use any art that does not directly serve the strongest weighted variables of execution. So basically, you don't need to make it pretty at first, because what users care about is not about the shape of your tree or the color of your sky. So anything that doesn't have any direct impact on your actual gameplay, just remove it. No need to work on it. And you remember the graph, like a lowest effort, highest impact, whatever. So early on, you can split test a lot of different creatives, starting from whatever variables that don't take a lot of your resource. So work with camera, lighting, colors first, see if it works. If it doesn't work, work on your character model. So just experiment a lot of different factors and variables. And explore both themes and mechanics. This one is what I want to really highlight. So when you decide your game, I want you guys to do a bit of market research. If you want to do like a sorting game right now, when there's like thousands of sorting games, then think about what kind of mechanic you want to put in this sorting theme, right? There's water sorting, there was like a rope sorting, there was bowl sorting, there's any sort of sorting game. So if you're gonna make another sorting game, then it has to be really great or different from existing games. How can you make it really different? Think about different mechanic. Maybe, can you sort not just swiping tap? Can you sort by drawing? Can you sort things by drawing different lines and dividing them into different groups? That's like a new mechanic and it will feel fresh. So that's the one thing that you can do. Another thing is, if you're gonna use just whatever the mechanic there is, let's say you're gonna use drawing mechanic, which is usually used in, I don't know, arcade, like voodoo style, like the wheel game, you draw your own thing. Then you wanna think about, okay, this drawing mechanic, I know this is marketable. People like drawing mechanic. Where can I put this drawing mechanic into? Like what kind of themes do I want to like put this drawing mechanic in, right? So it's either you come up with really brilliant mechanic in a common theme, or vice versa. but your game or your idea has to be either very different from existing games or a lot better than any of published games. And I think this is what's missing from a lot of developers. If you are coming into this industry and you're like, you don't know what's going on, then it's a great idea to copy some of the really popular games so you can learn how they design levels, like how they execute all these different things, learn about UI and the mechanic, like stuff like that. But after you learn everything from published games, you want to really think about like, where is the niche? Where's the niche market? Like, where can I differentiate my games from all these existing games? So I know hyper-casual industry is moving really, really fast. So we tend to ignore like ideation phase of execution. But I actually don't mind talking to my developers for weeks about what kind of ideas that we want to execute. Because the worst thing, or the thing that I really don't want to do with my developer is to waste their time, right? Everyone's time is valuable, so I really want you guys to validate your idea before start working on it, so that you don't waste your time. So I think that's it. And we have about 5 minutes if anyone has questions, and if it's a difficult place to ask questions, you can grab me after this session. You can just say hi. You can shoot me an email with your questions. Also, I have Ankush here with me. He's also from Lion Studios. I think Ankush basically knows everyone, so you can grab him, ask him questions. So yes, I'll just open the floor for questions for a few minutes. That's a good question. So IPM comes from any sort of campaigns that we set, right? So usually Lion Studios in initial testing, we run our campaigns on social media networks. So some Facebook audience networks. Sometimes we open it up to Google. So we usually we want to make sure that we get at least 500 installs. And then the duration really depends, right? If it's like a low CPI games, then maybe I can get 500 installs within 3 days. If it's like a high CPI, not really scaling games, then maybe it will take me a week. And IPM is coming from that specific campaign. So sometimes IPM comes from 3 days of campaign, sometimes 7 days of campaign. Really depends on the duration of campaign that we set up. So it's not like a absolute number of like absolute IP. There's no absolute IPM number of that game. Although, actually, now that I think about it, maybe there is an absolute number of IPM because if you don't change theme, then it's really difficult to appeal to different user groups no matter what. So maybe, and as we see in Gladiators in position examples, whether we change our mechanic, camera angle, UI, whatever, the IPM stays pretty similar. Obviously, depending on when you run your campaign, whether it's over the weekend, whether it's over the summer when all the kids are out, there is a little bit of fluctuation, but I think in general, your IPM will probably stay within like a certain range. Yeah. Yes.
So in the last two examples you showed, the IPM was high, but the CPI, compared this to the previous one, how IPM is thrice, but the CPI also is high. So usually if IPM is high, CPI is low, right? So
No, not necessarily, because like I said, IPM is the theme, right? It's all about the theme, whether your theme has like a broad appeal. So this one, IPM is pretty low because I think probably a lot of male audience not really interested in this theme. I mean, they're not really, I mean, do you guys really want to play this game? It's probably targeting only that specific female user group from 13 to 28, like 30 groups. So the IPM is pretty low because it doesn't have a broad appeal. But the CPI is really low because, like I said, CPI is about execution, like art and mechanic. Mechanic is clear, art is just absolutely amazing. So that's why it had low CPI, but also pretty low IPM because of the theme. If we look at this one, IPM is high because there's no theme, really. I mean, what is the theme here? It's kind of themeless. So whether you're like a kid in an elementary school or whether you're just some developer here in your 20s, 30s, anyone will find this pretty interesting. I mean, this looks fun, like, playing with gravity, and it has like a drawing mechanic. So this one has definitely like a broader appeal than the previous game targeting female users. That's why you see like high IPM. But the art is not as good as the other one, right? The other one was simulation, obviously focusing more on high art quality. Whereas this one is focusing more on the drawing mechanic. So the CPI is slightly higher. So to answer your question, it's not always that your IPM is high, your CPI is low, or vice versa. You can have low CPI and high IPM game. You can have really shitty game with high CPI and low IPM. So it really depends on the theme and execution of your game. Yes?
So if you go back to the box picture example, right? So the bad mechanic, the bad art had higher IPM. It's almost about half of this.
Right, that's a good question. But like I said, the IPM is not really different. So for example, just because this IPM was 20 and the next one is 10, I'm not gonna consider that this is better. That 10 difference IPM, it's basically nothing for publishers, right? Put it like this way. If you have like higher IPM than 50, 60 plus, then it's good enough for us. If it's anything below 50, it's all the same.
Got it. That was not my question. Basically, do you have strategies where you try both kind of campaigns for the same game, where you have higher reach but higher CPIs and low reach? So for scale, you're going for the first campaign. For lower cost of acquisition, you're going for the second campaign. Do you have a mix and match strategy that you guys use for any of these games?
I don't know exactly what the question is. So you're asking whether we run campaigns.
So, for example, one campaign has a higher IPM because you're not very tight on the theme and etc. But your CPIs are also low. The second one but your reach is higher, so your install numbers are higher, scale is higher. But for another campaign, for example, your IPM is low, but your CPI is also lower. So do you guys have any mix and matches of such campaigns?
Yes, absolutely. If you have experience working with any publishers, you will probably notice that we run a lot of creative campaigns. For Gladiators in Position, I think we have like a total of 18 campaigns running like 30 to 40 different creatives. So whenever we see a bit of CPI decrease, we don't really care about the IPM when it comes to creative because the theme wouldn't change, right? So if we see a bit of decrease in CPI, we analyze what makes that change. And we want to make sure that we include that specific factor in the next batch of creatives. So that's what we do. So for example, in Gladiators in Position, we tried a bunch of different character models. And the one that you guys are seeing had the lowest CPI. So from that point, any creatives that we made, we just stopped experimenting on character models because we knew this had the best lower CPI. Then we started working on different camera angles, different UI, different environment, stuff like that. Yes?
My question is, what is the critical number of downloads you typically use to say whether I should still scale the app or it's dead now?
I see. It depends on the publisher, right? But I only know how Lion works, so I'm just gonna answer what Lion does. So at Lion, we actually moved away from low CPI, low engagement games because of this Silicon game and other arcade games that we published for the last 3 years. The maximum profit that we want to give developers and we want to earn for ourselves, it was just pretty low for our standard for any arcade games. We basically, I mean, think about it. We worked on this game together, like arcade games, for 3 months. Everyone just, until midnight, like working on it, grinding it. We publish it. I don't know, maybe you guys will get $10,000, $20,000 a month. That's a lot of money, but it's not the money that you would expect from global publishing. Like, I want to give my developers $1 million, $2 million when they publish games with us, and that's what we promise. But if we're just gonna make $10,000, $20,000 a month, and then after 3 months, you guys will probably earn $60K, $70K, and then it dies down, what's the point, right? I mean, you can probably get that money if you have really good studio, you sign PPP deal or any sort of monthly payment deal, strategic partner deal. With any publisher, you can get that money without publishing a game. So that's the reason that we moved away from low CPI, low engagement games. Now we're focusing more on, we don't care about the CPI is a lie. We do care about the CPI. But any game like, around $1 CPI, we can handle if the engagement is there. For example, to answer your question, any prototype that we initially test is usually not ready to see the entire retention, right? I mean, we're not expecting you guys to come up with like a full build to see D7, D14 data. So what we'll be looking at is, if it's a level-based game, we want to make sure that the initial build has 25, 30 levels, and we will look at the level progression data. If 80% of users complete all 25 levels, there goes our retention. We can safely assume that when we have 100 levels, at least 60, 50% of users will play the entire 50 levels. That means high retention. So we don't focus really on like D7 retention early on. We focus more on the playtime and also the level progression or any sort of progression data based on the progression system your game has. I hope this answers your question, but I'm happy to talk more about this in my next session in the afternoon with Ayush, or just separately if you just come find me. Okay, I think we should probably stop here. 3 minutes over. So thank you so much for coming. And feel free to come grab me if you guys have any questions. And email me if you guys have any prototype, not arcade, not simulation. If you have really good prototype with good engagement, shoot me an email and let's talk. All right, thank you guys.